Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. We are looking at Bayonetta Origins today and I very much love this game. I wasn't sure how I'd go with it at first. I hadn't really been following it since its announcement and I wasn't sure what it was going to offer me, but I have had the opportunity to get hands-on with the first 5 chapters now, and while I was a little bit surprised at it at first, that surprise has really quickly turned to joy. I really do love this game. I have a full preview up at digitallydownloaded.net, and I recommend you check that out for my thoughts on how it actually plays so far. For this video, though, I want to talk more about how clever it is for the developers to do a coming-of-age story for Bayonetta, because that idea and the way that they have executed it is really quite ingenious, at least so far. So as we all know, Bayonetta is a really, really cool character. The Bayonetta that we do know from the trilogy is assured, cool, and confident. She's incredibly sexy and empowered. She has a scathing sense of humor and takes absolutely no prisoners. Her backstory was always going to be fundamentally interesting because of who she turned into. And what a contrast we get in the opening chapter to this game. This coming-of-age Bayonetta is not timid or weak, because that would have broken character continuity entirely. She has always been a strong character, so she was always going to be a strong character, even in her youth. But while she is headstrong and determined, she's also got this really sweet edge that stems from her inexperience and youth. She carries a teddy bear around with her, Cheshire, and there's a delicateness about the way that she moves that would later be replaced with that very assured strut that we know from the Bayonetta trilogy. The genius about this is that we know that she's going to turn into Bayonetta, and at the same time, we can see what she's like at this stage. So we know that we're going to be in for quite the transformational journey to get her from where she is at the start of this game to where she'll be when she becomes the Bayonetta. This is backed up by the really very good fairy tale trappings that the game presents. There's a clever bit of subtle subversion going on in there, since Bayonetta and her mentor are witches, and witches are not traditionally the heroes of fairy tales. And I do hope the game explores that juxtaposition and contrast further on down the track, because it doesn't do too much with it in the early stages. However, it does set that darkly whimsical tone and aesthetic that is quite unique to fairy tales, and that too is a really great way of distinguishing who Bayonetta was to who she'll become. The Bayonetta in the later trilogy doesn't really have that fairy tale edge any longer, so there is a contrast built into the very kind of structure of this game. So to put it in literature terms, this game is very much an example of the Bildungsroman genre. And of course, there are no shortage of examples of Bildungsroman in video games. It's a very common literary genre that game developers work within. But what makes this one a particularly interesting example is that we already know the result of the experience. We know who Bayonetta is going to become. This makes the psychological and moral growth from youth to adulthood, that journey that is such a core part of the Bildungsroman, such an intriguing premise in this particular game. Bayonetta doesn't grow up to become a normal part of society as such. Her moral and psychological development is different because she becomes a very different person. So that gives this particular Bildungsroman a different quality in kind. It has a kind of mystery about it. How did she become who she is? What is her story? And obviously it's going to be very unique because she is such a unique character. So just what was the process that got her there? These are all questions that you're going to be asking as you're playing, and it is quite fun to see it all kind of play out in the way that it does. What did surprise me a little bit at first is how traditionally this one plays it as a Bildungsroman when you consider just how subversive the overall series tends to be. But make no mistake, this is indeed a Bildungsroman. When you break down the genre, you get the following kind of 4 points or plot direction. Firstly, there's a loss. The protagonist experiences some kind of profound emotional loss at the start of the story, and we know this to be true of Bayonetta Origins because the entire quest is a search for the young girl's mother. That's not a spoiler, that's even in the trailer. We know that that is kind of the catalyst for the adventure in this game. Secondly, then, there's the journey. So inspired by the loss, the protagonist sets out on a journey, either physical or metaphorical, to find the answer to a big question and gain life experience. Now, we know this is also true of Bayonetta Origins, and it's very clear within the first couple of chapters, because the girl does go on a journey to find out what happened to her mother, and secondly, who the white wolf is that is guiding her. There is this mysterious kind of white wolf that is big and massive and obviously very fairy tale in tone that is pulling her through the journey, and she's following it. She was called to it. So its role in her development is a mystery and a kind of life experience that we will no doubt find out about by the end of the story. Then the third part of the Bildungsroman is the conflict, where the protagonist's journey is inhibited and indeed therefore not an easy one. This is present through the game, of course, because there are fairies and other denizens of the forest that are looking to harm our young Bayonetta, and she needs to fight them back. So the conflict is quite literal in this case. And then finally, there's the maturity. So there is that moment or that process where the protagonist undergoes immense psychological growth, change, and maturity. And we do know that this is going to happen because, like I said earlier, Bayonetta will become the Bayonetta of the trilogy. We know that she goes through this process. That is the purpose of this game, to tell us what that process was, how she got there. And it's not obvious from the first couple of chapters. I don't know at this stage what that process will be. So it will no doubt be the focus of the game's conclusion. And it has this kind of mystery quality to it in that way. So knowing that the end result of the growth will be the Bayonetta, we play on because we just have to know how she turned out to be the character that she is. Of course, nothing that I've talked about in this video is surprising. The Bildungsroman has been a genre that has been around since the 19th century. It is a timeless genre. It has outlasted a lot of other narrative genres along the way. And whether it's writers or filmmakers or game developers, it is a genre that people continue to return to when creating art, because there is something timeless and inherently human about the genre. It is something that audiences from all around the world will be able to relate to on some level. So it is a topic for discussion that will probably never go away. And it hasn't really changed that much. The Bildungsromans of the 19th century are not that different to the Bildungsromans that are produced today. So it would be a mistake to suggest that Bayonetta Origins is doing anything too original with the genre itself. There is some gentle subversions in there from time to time in terms of your expectations. But that's just the nature of Bayonetta as a character and the lore behind her. So far, the story itself has been one more of comfortable familiarity rather than anything that is too surprising and new, basically. You're going in expecting a Bildungsroman with a grim fairy tales style aesthetic and storytelling structure, and that is what you get. There is nothing wrong with that. In fact, I happen to love that combination of genres, so this game has really kind of connected with me in a way that I wasn't really expecting going into it. It really, really has connected with me. And certainly in terms of how it plays, it has its clever hooks. So in my preview on digitallydownloaded.net, where I talk a bit about how the game plays, you'll see that it has something in there that keeps it original so that it doesn't feel too stale as a video game as well. But as a narrative, it's definitely aiming to be more classical and traditional than innovative. And just as a final quick note, I will say that the game is absolutely gorgeous. It has a wonderful presentation, it has a charming sense of humor, and the performances are all universally amazing. For a game that seemed like it was just going to be a cheap spin-off as such, something to keep the Bayonetta franchise going while they figure out what to do with it next, there is a real love of the character, love of the lore, and all of that in there too, which was really nice to see. Anyway, that is all I've got to say about the game right now. I will have a review up when embargo for that lifts, but in the meantime, let me know your thoughts. Are you looking forward to this game? Does the footage appeal to you? Are you a fan of the Bildungsroman genre? And does the idea of kind of Bayonetta's coming-of-age story appeal to you? Let me know in the comments. If you've enjoyed this video, hit that like and subscribe button. That way you won't miss any of the others as I put them up. And if you want to support what we're doing at digitallydownloaded.net, you can do so. We have a Patreon, and your support goes directly back into what we do. So the more support we get, the bigger and better we can grow, and the more we can do. So please do consider backing us if you do enjoy our work. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. I hope this was enjoyable, and we will see you at the next video.